Hello, Svetlana. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Svetlana, we would like to know about your experience learning Russian. Could you please tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So, when I started learning Russian, I just listened to the language a lot before I tried to speak it.
Okay, when you say a lot, how much is it?
Well, I cannot tell the exact number of hours because it was years ago and I didn't keep track of them. But by my rough estimation, I think around 2 to 3 hours a day for a year or so before I tried speaking.
So, we're talking about roughly 1,000 hours of listening.
Right.
How much of the language were you able to understand at that point?
I think around 60 to 70% of normal interactions between native speakers.
Not bad. And when you started speaking, did it come out smoothly?
In what sense?
Like, were you pre thinking, forming sentences in your head before saying them out loud?
No, definitely not. I was just improvising the language. It wasn't with the whole sentences at first, though. I started by just saying separate words and gradually came to form my own sentences.
Oh, I see. Did you say everything right?
No, not really.
Did you have someone to correct your mistakes then? Like every time you would make one?
Well, occasionally someone would correct me, but it was really rare.
And now your Russian is flawless, right? How did you manage to come to this level without being corrected?
I just kept listening and it got fixed over time.
Oh, I see. Makes sense. Now, what kind of content did you listen to? News? Radio? Netflix?
None of those. Just native speakers talking to me directly, telling me stories, trying to make me understand, speaking slowly, repeating the same stuff over and over again. That's pretty much it.
Did you understand everything from day one?
No, it was a bit tough at first, but I just kept listening, and in the end, I could understand.
Okay, now let's talk about vocabulary. How did you learn it? Did you take notes while listening?
No, I think for the first like 6 years from when I started, I didn't even know how to write in Russian.
Oh, really? How did you manage to learn words then?
Well, the ones I heard more frequently just stuck, and I was able then to use them spontaneously while speaking.
So, no Anki, no space repetition, nothing. Alright, now let's talk about reading. When did you start reading in Russian?
I think around 4 to 5 years from when I started.
Wow, how did it go? Was it easy for you to read?
Well, I had to learn the letters first, but then if I knew a word, I could then read it. If I didn't, I couldn't. I would very likely get the stress wrong.
So, you're basically saying that it doesn't make much sense to learn from reading if you don't know many words because you wouldn't know what the unknown words are supposed to sound like anyway. Am I getting you right?
Yeah, exactly.
It also means you didn't need to know the spelling of a word to be able to understand it.
Why would someone even ask that?
Well, many learners say they need to know the spelling of a word, they need to read subtitles and stuff to be able to understand what they hear.
I mean, if you don't know the spelling, you just don't need it. You understand the words you heard many times. There is no need to connect a word with its spelling, only with its meaning in a certain context. That's all you need to understand the word. I mean, it's obvious, or am I going crazy?
Fair enough. Now let's move on to the next question. how do you estimate your overall level at that point?
Well, I could communicate effortlessly with native speakers unless it was a specific professional sphere.
So you are saying you were fluent in Russian before you learned how to read or write?
Right.
Cool. Now let's talk about grammar. When did you start studying it?
I think around 9 to 10 years from when I started.
What? 10 years? But you were already able to understand and speak Russian without any problem, right?
Right. 100% fluently and accurately.
Without knowing any grammar.
Exactly.
How could you tell then whether something was right or wrong?
Well, if it sounded right, it was right then.
But how do you develop this kind of feeling?
There is only one way, by listening to the language a lot.
Alright, we've covered listening, speaking, reading, writing, vocabulary, grammar. Now let's talk about attitude. What was your goal back then? What motivated you? Did you put a lot of conscious effort to reach the level you have now?
No, in fact, I wasn't even aware I was learning anything. I was just living my life.
So you're saying that your focus wasn't on the language itself, but rather on the content, like on the message.
Right.
Okay, one last question. What's your native language?
Russian? Why?
Hang on a sec. So all this time you've been basically telling us how you learned your native language as a kid.
Yeah, so not only kids can learn this way,